What's happening, gang? What's back live? ESPN Radio Studios, San Diego. Checking in with Stephanie Mendez. She's the owner of the law office of Stephanie Mendez. You can check her out at smendezlaw.com. Stephanie did us a solid. Well, first of all, the first solid she did us is she reminded us or introduced us to the concept that she is the family law, yes, but it's the Jerry Springer of the family law. So, gang, you're in for a treat today. She's dropping some truth inside of Truth Radio. We hit up last segment with knowing your rights that you have before you agree to let them go. I mean, we all know the stats. I don't know if this is true or not. Steph, you'd probably be a better resource, but you always hear people say, 50%? Is that accurate? Yeah.
Yes and no. People have kind of misconceptions. They think, okay, well, in specifics with custody visitation, then they'll live with me 1 week and they'll live with the other parent the other week. And again, unless the parties agree to that, the court's likely not going to order it.
And I even led you astray. I was actually I was going more global.
Oh.
About 50% of relationships end up in divorce.
Oh, yeah.
Or marriages, I should say.
Yeah. I think the divorce rate is much higher than marriages. So, yeah, I don't know exactly what the percentage is. I looked it up when I first started practicing back in 2009, and I think it was 63 or 64%.
Yowzer, mama.
So,
yeah. So knowing your rights before you agree to let them go is a key part of that. So we hit up the financial, the custody, visitation, if there's kids, assets and debts, which is different than financial. That's an important piece. And then you laid out your free report, top 5 things that you need to know that keep in mind, probably better said, before you go into court.
Yes.
So you don't look like a fool.
Yes.
In front of the judge.
Yes.
Who's going to judge you.
Yes.
That's his job.
Yes.
Or her job.
Yes.
So, gang, if you missed that, that's a key piece to this conversation. Go back to thegreenhousegroup.com. I'm sorry, I just said my website wrong. It's thegreenhousegroupinc.com. You're going to end up in some green place over in Norway. I think actually has that URL /Truth Radio, and catch this episode that we just finished on that. This is a lead in or a tie into that. And it's if you're planning on splitting up in the next 6 months, this is who you'll want to become. And we took a little risk in that titling because the truth is, how well that conversation goes is how well the lead up to it goes. You don't get to come into court that day and say, I'm a changed man, right? You got to show behavior, right? So what would be the first behavioral piece that you'll want to make sure you address a minimum of 6 months in advance?
So this is specific if a party has children involved.
Okay.
You're going to want to make sure that you are actively participating in that child's life. I understand people work. I understand, I get home and all I want to do is relax. Well, you know what? The other parent, if the parent's been a stay-at-home parent, has been doing all of that. So they both want the same thing. But the person who goes to work, typically it's the man, and that sounds really sexist, but it's true. And so
it's not sexist if it's true.
Hey, that's what I say too.
Now, if you say the man should be the one working, then now you're in trouble.
So when I'm going to use the man, and so when comes home from work, he needs to make it a point to be involved in that child's life, finding out how his day went at school, and I'm going to pretend that Dad has a boy, how his day went at school, who the teachers are, be present. I mean, I can't stress that enough because it's going to come down to a fight for custody because almost always, again, there's exceptions, but almost always the parents don't agree to what the other person thinks is best for the child.
Imagine that.
I know, right? Who would have thought in this controversial divorce?
Hey, but no lie, man. I mean, merging families, merging lives, I should say first, and then creating families as a result of those merged lives, it's difficult. I think I tell you this. I mean, you made a profession out of it, but the whole concept of the online dating and the Match.coms and the eHarmonies and stuff like that, we come from the generation where that sounds ridiculous.
Right.
Because you're supposed to serendipitously bump into your future soulmate. Right.
At the bar.
Or
the gym.
With a little bit of a light on.
Right. Hopefully.
Right. But to be truthful about that, God, the science doesn't quite hurt so much because everybody's super Pollyannic until you have kids.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, these old reptilian stuff starts coming. You turn into that guy, on Men in Black who needs the sugar.
Right.
Religion, school. all that stuff starts happening. And so like these things are going to, and then you add onto that the drama of a split up.
Yep.
And then it gets, right.
And what I like to tell people when they come in is that's when the ish gets real, because you're really going to see who the other person is.
Right.
When you guys are together, the parents, everybody has different parenting styles. But when you're together, you make it work because you're like, okay, we're together.
You're making it work.
Exactly. But the minute you guys decide to split, or one person decides to split, then all of a sudden every single thing that you did not agree with the other person doing is now a huge issue.
Stephanie, that's a big share.
Thanks.
Seriously. I mean,
it's true.
It's not a fun one.
No.
It's not a convenient one, but it's a really big one because
it's accurate.
Because because your split up E is going to change.
Yep.
And you're not even going to recognize that person. It's going to be the defensive mama bear or papa bear, respectively speaking. And for we're not judging it. It's just
it's the reality. It's the reality.
So we're talking about this, right? So behaviorally speaking, becoming more involved with the children's lives. Mm-hmm. Now, what kind of evidence would you be using for that? Like,
so the courts look at what you. And in this example, I'm going to use the mom, okay? Because typically moms like to keep lists, especially for grievances or issues that they have with the other parent. Because this is going to sound really bad, but in my experience, it's usually the moms that try and keep the kids away from the dads.
Okay.
And it's more not because they don't agree with dad or they don't want to. It's more as a control thing.
Okay.
And it sucks, but that's true.
Okay.
So in trying to show that you've been present, that you've been a participant, and being there for this child, you're going to want to have text messages. You're going to want to have telephone logs. The courts will allow all that. Facebook messages, if you're saying, hey, I want to see him or her, and mom says nope, or doesn't respond or any of that. All of that is evidence. All of that can be shown to the judge because your actions from the time that you separate to the time you go into the court on custody issues specifically, all come into play. Because the judge will look at you and be like, well, why didn't you let this happen? Why are you keeping the kid from dad or mom or whatever, usually dad? And that behavior, you're gonna look bad in front of the judge. And the judge, that same judge, keeps your case for the whole time. You don't get to change judges because you don't like their decision. You don't get to. Your case is assigned to that judge. That's it.
That's interesting. I like that, actually. I mean, could see how that could cause a lot of unnecessary stress and disappointment, but
absolutely.
But that's a good continuity plan, I think, from the other side of that conversation. So, when you go to the kids' soccer game, rather than just sitting over in your car,
no, be there, be out there, be cheering. Obviously, don't get into a scene with the other parent,
right.
or bring your significant other who may cause a scene.
Right.
You're there to support your child.
Right.
Your child doesn't need to be in the middle of your guys' conflict.
Yeah. And I hate to keep bringing this thing back around to money, but if we're talking about setting things up properly in advance, if you know things aren't going well, it doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it does. Sometimes, flashbang, I hate you, you hate me all of a sudden, right? Right. But usually it's like there's a lead up, and you can see it. When you look back, you may not see it right away, but when you look back, once the action happens, you're going to be like, oh, I saw all that. I see it now. So what about the money?
So money is huge. That kind of goes with knowing your rights. You're going to want to know what bank accounts the other person has. You're going to want to know what's in those bank accounts. Be an active participant in that as well. You can't sit back and say, oh, well, husband handles all the bills, so I don't need to worry about it. No, come on, be real. Like, you need to know. You should know.
Is it kind of creepy? I don't want to use the word creepy because it's actually more important than that, but it's whatever word, we'll figure it out later. If like the husband does all the finances and both people know things aren't going too well, and all of a sudden the wife takes a huge interest in the money.
Well, obviously, I think that's a huge sign.
Vice versa, right?
Yeah. But I mean, if you conceal assets, that's a huge thing in a divorce or legal separation. The assets are going to come out one way or the other. Either you can voluntarily hand them out and provide them, like in the disclosures, which you have to do, it's mandatory, or it's going to take investigation, in which case that's going to cost a ton of money. And if you're the spouse that's hiding it, you're going to most likely end up paying for it because the judge will order you to pay for the attorney's fees and costs that the other person had to go through to trace where all the money went. So don't hide it, look for it. And in reality, I mean, wife may know where things are kept. Go look at them. get copies, take a screenshot, take a telephone picture, cell phone picture. All of that can be used. All you need is to know where for example, bank accounts are, what bank. You don't necessarily have to have the account number, but you just
that they exist.
A starting point.
So that somebody could ask for them to be presented.
Absolutely. Right? Because once you have an area, a bank account, a bank name, you can subpoena those records and you can get everything in them. And you can trace them and you can see if there was deposits made, withdrawals made, transfers, back and forth, whatever. It's a starting point. You need to at least know that.
So, gang, if you're planning on splitting up in the next 6 months or more, who you'll want to become is, if there's children involved, become more involved with them if you plan on spending any more time with them after the divorce and the judgment is made, right? And then secondly, become more aware of the finances. Get a good litany of all the different things that have money associated with you in your own family empire, you might say. And get really clear about if there's any money that's being moved around suspiciously is a big part of that as well. Gang, that's why we got Stephanie Mendez up in here. Stephanie, killing it. The Jerry Springer of law, as she says it. If you want to check her out, you might say during her day job when she's not Jerry Springering, it's smendezlaw.com. You can call her the old-fashioned way at 760-213-2395. I'll get that number one more time, 760-213-2395. Steph, we got a Chargers game coming up.
Yes, we do.
This is ESPN Radio, after all. I mean, it doesn't hurt to talk about sports a little bit, right?
Right.
Now, what's interesting about this game is it's going to be Military Appreciation Day. And we got the Niners coming in.
Yes, I hear.
And there's probably going to be a powder keg, I would guess, with some interesting elements of that. We're going to have our own fun spin on that because we're going to talk about military divorces. How many ways are they different with Stephanie Mendez? We'll be right back, gang.